So, hello, this is Pastor Christopher Murundi of the Lutheran Institute of Regenerative Agriculture, and it is my great joy to have here for our second webinar of the new year, Rory Groves, a farmer, a Christian thinker about farming, about the trades up in southern Minnesota, and author of this book that we've actually talked about on a podcast, Durable Trades. And so I'm very excited to have him come and join us today. I said when we launched the webinar series that we would have folks from within kind of the Lutheran world, and we've had some folks come in from outside. So we're really excited to have Rory kind of come into the Lutheran world here and give us his perspective on a number of things. I'm really pumped about this interview. And keep watching, folks. We'll have a lot more webinars coming in the months to come. In fact, I'm coming up with new ideas every couple of days of who else I can ask to come on. So we'll have webinars all through this year. So don't want to take up any more of Rory's time so he can talk. So let's get started with this, Rory. Hey, what got you to the point where you are writing a book about durable trades, where you're farming, where you're talking and writing and speaking about agriculture and the interaction of agriculture and Christian community? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up here. That gives you a chance to kind of tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to where you're at now.
Certainly. Thank you, Chris, and appreciate the opportunity to be on the show. Appreciate you mentioning the book or discussing it. I think it's a really important topic. And also, some of my best friends are Lutherans. So I'm actually married to a Lutheran. My wife grew up in the ELCA church. My father-in-law pastored his entire career up here in Minnesota. So lots of family and friends from the great Lutheran tradition. And my background is Pentecostal. And so that always made for an interesting combination, but we've made it work and God has blessed us abundantly. So this is great. I'm really grateful for what you guys are doing. I think it's an important work for organizations such as yours. Many other folks, of course, we have Alan Carlson wrote the foreword to the book, and I don't know if he's been on the show before, but he's a huge proponent and one of the greatest voices, I think, right now in the culture to discuss these things. So I encourage folks to check him out as well. But yeah, what's the deal with agriculture? I've just been reading more about the agrarian mindset and some of these things recently. And I think one of the interesting things about it is the author was speaking, his name is Michael Bunker, and he was speaking about there's something in the conscience of a man that's drawing him back to the land. Even if he does not have a particular penchant to farm, or maybe he doesn't even have that desire. But what is it about people when they want to they work so hard in the city, and where do they go on their vacations, right? They want to get away from it all. They want to go somewhere wild and pure and natural. They go camping. And what is all this? What is this raw connection with the land that people are desirous of? And why is it latent in us? Could it be that God has created us for such a purpose as to steward his creation? And could it be that as we move away from that core design for the human machine, that as we start to abstract ourselves, I guess you'd say, with industrial technologies and all of the modern amenities that we have in modern life, could it be that we're not finding those to be the fulfillment that we hope they would be, but maybe there is something truly in agriculture, something in the land that calls to us, that desires that we become part of what God is doing through his creation? And so that was, I never thought about it philosophically when we moved out to our farm 10 years ago. I just knew that I wanted a little bit more room. I had background was in computers. Actually, all I ever knew was computers. I was the kid playing video games from the earliest age, programming a computer when I was 6 years old. And just my whole life revolved around technology and computers. And I never would have imagined I'd be, talking to you here today about agriculture from a farm in southern Minnesota. So for me, it's been an interesting journey. But I think one of the pivotal things that happened to me is I became aware of my overdependence on a system, a grid system, a worldwide industrial kind of a system that if if the lights were ever to go out, for example, if there were ever to be a long-term shortage or disruption or something like that, my skills as a computer programmer would become quickly irrelevant. I remember this dawning on me one day many years ago and thinking, it might be a good idea to learn something that's a little bit more resilient, just even so I could maybe feed myself something, or I could help somebody else do something that's building or fixing things or mechanically inclined, because I had none of those skill sets. My entire career, my entire life was all just working on keyboards and screens and in cubicles and things like that. And so, I mean, the itch was there for some time. We found ourselves on a farm about 10 years ago, as I said, and we initially just kind of saw it as a better option for us to raise our family, a little bit more room, like I said, to spread out, maybe, raise a few chickens. We didn't really have anything in mind besides it was truly a hobby farm in the truest sense of the word. And there was a self-sufficiency bent towards it. That was very much in my mind. I was seeing the world, everyone was watching the world. We had gone through the '08 recession, and we had seen how tenuous modern jobs can be. So there was something there that I did want to become more self-sufficient. But over the years, that we talk about this philosophy of the land, it really started to have an effect on me and on my family. And in a couple of ways I would articulate that is, first of all, this connection, like I've described already, when I was in the garden, when I was tending, the land or orcharding or working with the animals or whatever it was, there was something so gratifying about the tangible nature of what I was doing. You plant a seed in the ground, the seed comes up within about a week. You cultivate, you tend that, you see it's right there in front of you every day. And I was used to a world that was very ethereal, right? It was very abstract. I'm writing code that would run on, say, a website that would be used by someone that I had never met and will never meet. And everything was just so procedural and abstract. And I just didn't really find the deeper fulfillment of what I was doing. They paid me a lot of money. I mean, I was grateful for a job, but that just wasn't fulfilling. And so there was this tangibility aspect of working the land that I just really, it grew on me. And I remember it dawned on me one day as I had to leave, I had to finish up my chores in the garden and head in to do my real job, which was as a software. I've owned multiple software businesses and been a consultant in different things, but my quote unquote real job was to sit and stare at a computer screen. And so I was leaving, our garden, and I was leaving my family, who we would always garden together, and there would always be things, for the whole family to do, to go to that real job. And I remember thinking, I wish these roles could be reversed. I wish the stuff on the computer could be the more marginal activities that I get to on the weekends and in the evenings, and that my real job could be tending the land, doing something productive with my hands, with my family. And it dawned on me, I thought of that verse in Genesis of God putting Adam in the garden to tend it and keep it. And it struck me that this was our first job. My first design as a human being was to tend the land. And what have we made it? And how have we gotten ourselves into this place where it's no longer even an option for the vast majority of society to go out and live on the land? It's just not an option. And so anyway, so that's some of why I kind of started down that path. And I think just to kind of to bring it back and answer your question, I think that as these things over the years, we started to progress more, and we got sheep and we got goats and started milking the goats, and we got more invested in tending the things that we were doing here. We just have a small, I mean, by comparison, we have 10 acres, so it's not a huge amount of land by historical stretches for farming, certainly. But it's plenty for us. I mean, and it's all the land in the world coming from 1/10 of an acre in a city lot. So We just continued little bit by little bit. We're very slow learners, and when we didn't have, my wife and I did not have any farming background, but we just learned little by little, and we just loved everything we were doing. The actual learning process was so gratifying. Becoming more independent and more self-sufficient, like tapping our maple trees was one of the first things that we did. We loved it so much. We had a big sugar maple tapping party the following spring, and we still do that to this day. Actually, we're going to have one coming up here in about a month, where we'll invite other families out to the property. We'll show them how to tap maple trees. We'll show them how to boil the sap down into syrup, and then we'll go have a big pancake feed. And why do we do that? Because we just love the experience. It just feels so empowering, I think, to take on some of these self-sufficient, agriculturally related tasks, because it demystifies a lot of the process of, where does our food come from? How can you ethically and sustainably harvest that food? And then, more importantly, how can you do something together as a family, which is really where I'm going with all of this. What can you do together with your family in this day and age that would actually unify you, rather than fragment your family into a myriad of different specialized jobs and tasks? And so that kind of all led up to, as you can tell, I'm pretty gung-ho about this kind of a topic, but that really is what happened over a period of years, as I reflected on, where am I going in my high-tech career? Do I want more of the same 20 years from now? Or do I want to have something that could be a generational inheritance for my sons and my daughters, something that we could really build up, maybe a family-based business using the land, using the farm? So that is where my investigation in what became durable trades, that's where it started. I just started to look through, what are my options? What are my choices if I don't want to be a software engineer the rest of my life? If I want to do something that's, with my family, still be able to earn a living, build some more self-sufficiency so that we're, less dependent on the grid, what are the choices for a modern family? And the result was the book Durable Trades.
And that's really been kind of, I've been hearing that running through those ideas all the way through what our initial discussion here, your initial what you've talked about, and this idea of trades that are durable, trades that endure. But to me, what I found so fascinating about your book, and really, I'll just say the first 30 pages. If I was a guy who highlighted books, I'm not a guy who highlights books, but if I was, I would highlight just about every sentence. I mean, it was just so remarkable. That first section just really stands out, and then the rest of the book is going through the trades one by one. So there's plenty more to highlight as you move through. But what struck me was these trades are durable, not just because they make money, not just because they've stood the test of time, but exactly what you just talked about, because they are supportive of the family. And to me, that's maybe the first step. We're going to talk more about Christian community, so that's families coming together in a few minutes. But just expand on that a little bit. These trades are durable because they actually support and uplift the family.
Yeah, so the subtitle of the book is Family-Centered Economies That Have Stood the Test of Time. And what I was after, now this was me coming from the extreme opposite end. I was as specialized as you can get. And so what I wanted to know is that, if I'm going to trade this in for a whole new career, I don't want that career to become obsolete in about 3 years when some robot, displaces me. I want to really know, I want to really put my investment towards something that's going to last. And so, coming from the high-tech background where everything goes obsolete, as most folks know, and if they don't know that, just ask your neighbor, who probably knows somebody who's in high tech. It's just constantly turning over. It's the nature of the beast. So for me, I was thinking, you hear about these professions. We have a cousin who's like a 5th generation farmer, and you hear about this from time to time. There are these family-based businesses that had gone on for generations, and it's like, how do they do that? And what is it about that kind of work? And how do you establish something that could be a generational inheritance like that? So to me, I had to come up with some criteria in order to make that list. And I want to stress this, is that when I wrote this book, I started this for no other reason than our own family. I was just trying to look at what are my options. I'm a father. At the time I started writing it, I was a father of, I think, 4 kids. I think we had the 5th kid when before the book was published, and then we actually just had a 6th kid about 6 months ago. So it's rapidly growing agrarian family. but this was, I think, it's a very personal treatise on things, because I'm trying to justify to myself, why would I trade something in that has everything of society behind it, saying, yes, you should specialize, and you should have the most advanced amenities that society has to offer, and all. Why would I trade these things in? So a lot of what's in there in the first 30 to 50 pages of the book is the premise, is what's the problem? Why even bother talking about this subject at all? So I try to lay out the issues that we're looking at, and they're very significant issues. I mean, this is the kind of stuff like end of an empire type of issues. I really truly believe that we're coasting on fumes at this point. So something needs to be done substantially if you don't want to go over the cliff with the rest of society. You need to put your stake in the ground. You need to start building something resilient with your family. It starts at home. But then, okay, so yes, we want to do that, but what can we do? So these are all trades. There's over 60, there's 61 total in the book, but they're all trades that existed before the Industrial Revolution. That takes us about 200 plus years into the past. And if you go back that far, you'll find out that there are really only a few dozen trades, like occupations, available for people back in that day. You had, of course, the farmers and the shepherds and the tailors and the apothecaries and the innkeepers and various, metal workers and various types of trades. And the interesting thing is that most of those trades, there were, I think, about 70 estimated in 1790. So right when our country was getting its constitution ratified. There were the vast majority of those trades are still around today. Some of them are not all of them, but most of them are. Whereas if you see what happened with the Industrial Revolution, and I chart this in the book, where it rises, first into the hundreds of occupations and then into the thousands, and now we're into the tens of thousands. There's approximately 30,000 occupations available today for someone to go into professionally. And, you can't even hardly keep track of it. That probably grows by 1,000 professions a year. But at the same time, almost none of those professions, I don't think any of them, have survived since after the Industrial Revolution started. Meaning, if you take a job that was around, say, a telegraph operator or a lamp lighter or any of these specialized trades that were around in the 19th century, they're all gone. They've all become obsolete. And the same thing's going to happen to the jobs now. Search engine optimizer, Google AdWords specialist, all these things that are highly sought after, and they pay a lot of money right now in these really narrow specialized fields. They're not going to be around much longer because the field changes so fast. I mean, you're not going to have a 5th generation search engine optimizer family business, right? You'd be lucky to get, 5 to 10 years out of something like that. And so anyway, so I use this criteria to break that down. And then to the point of the family centeredness. Now, the other thing I wanted to know is not just what's durable, what's going to be around, but what's going to bring my family together. Not every business lends itself to families working together, but I wanted our family to be together. That was a huge reason of why I would make this shift. So I ranked the different trades according to just a whole myriad of criteria, such as, like, are there opportunities for children to work in the trade? Are there opportunities for older adults who maybe aren't as desirable in a corporate economy, but is there a place for them to be part of the family business even as they're older and maybe their strength isn't what it used to be? Is there a place for husband and wife, both genders, to be able to contribute? Can it be home-based? Can there be tangible assets that get generated from the business to pass on? So I came up with a whole list of criteria across several categories, and I ranked each of the trades. So a big chunk of the book is just going through the summaries of each of these trades, explaining why they are more durable or less durable, or more family-centered or less family-centered. So it's really intended to be a reference for families if they're looking for something out there that's different, if they feel like this isn't what I was designed to do, right? They hear that their conscience has pricked them and they said, I need to get something that's more wholesome for my family and something that's more connected with creation, then this is one option for you to look through, is to see if any of these things would match your family or your interests or your talents. And then you can get at least a start, at least a summary of what that might be.
Well, let's expand the topic a little bit wider then. I've been a rural person for most of my life. I was the last graduating class of a high school that now is consolidated, and I've been a rural pastor now for of my 12 years of being a pastor. I've been a rural pastor for 8 of those years. Well, yeah, technically, yeah, eight of those years, 8 or 9 of those years. And what everyone tells me, all my members in the three different places I've served as a rural pastor, everyone talks about, well, there used to be so many people in church. There used to be so many people out in out in the countryside. The school bus used to pick up so many people, and all these things. And we rural America has emptied out, and then our churches have also suffered because of this. And at the same time, we're seeing kind of a loss of community within our culture in general, and then also within the church. How can, in your mind, how can agriculture, but not just agriculture, the durable trades, what connection does agriculture, do the other durable trades have to Christian community and the rebuilding of Christian community, the rebuilding of rural America?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, one thing to keep in mind is that a lot of us who are looking at this and making some drastic changes or feeling that some drastic changes are necessary. We're kind of witnessing the failure of a model that's been in motion for a number of years and number of generations. And so it's kind of one of those things that was a slow creep. Um, and now some of us are saying, whoa, this is very alarming. This probably can't go on for much longer. You're seeing all of the fragmentation, like you say, in the community, within families, and, with the loneliness and despair deaths are at an all-time high, according to how they track those kinds of things. So by the actual measures of social stability, social health, and, right, look at the last couple of years in terms of upheaval. So there's many, many clear signs that the promises of modernity, the promises of industrialism, are not actually proving out. Not only are they not proving out, people are pining for a way to get back at this point to the land again and to become less dependent on the system. But all that to say is it didn't happen overnight, and we're probably not going to be able to undo it overnight. It might take a couple generations to get back into a position where we have more stability, and hopefully that's something that we can do and do it peacefully and avoid some kind of calamitous effect necessitating it. But the biggest thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is, I really believe that need drives community. In other words, just as the nuclear family has broken apart in recent times, a lot of the reason for that is the loss of function in the family. Families historically, the concept of a family economy is such that it was the household that provided for its own needs. The husband needed the wife needed the husband. They both needed the children. And so everyone worked together. They all had a common vision, which was like, let's not starve this winter. That's a good common vision. But there's other benefits as well. But the point is that they needed each other. They were forced to work together. And because they were forced to work together, they built deep bonds. And anyone who has moved into, let's say, homeschooling, if you used to be in public education, both my wife and I grew up in public education, and we homeschool our kids. And it's remarkable the different relationship that we have and that our children have with each other, just because we're around many, many more hours of each day. So that homeschooling environment necessitates that we work together. And if kids can't get along, that becomes the school lesson for the day, is how do we How do we not break fellowship over a little toy? We have to learn to work together. So those kinds of things, as we began to move away from the necessity of families working together and communities working together, to take this to the next logical step, when communities no longer needed each other, in other words, the families did not depend on each other in the same community, there began to be a loss of need for a community in the first place, because you could get the things that you needed from a catalog, let's say, or a train would come through, and you stopped depending on each other for the things that you needed. And you might say, oh, well, how wonderful that you didn't need each other, that you could get what you needed from a store, and you weren't as dependent on those troublesome neighbors for maintaining those relationships. So you had more stuff, which is a key factor that people measure. How much stuff do we have today, right? Materialism and consumption or consumerism. But what happened to the relationships? Where is the relational capital that we used to have? Because when you needed each other to survive, there was a deep-rooted safety net already baked into that community. I mean, you had to help each other. What would happen if a barn burns down? This even happens now in Amish communities. If a barn burns down, see to it if the next morning there isn't a crowd of about 500 Amish men there ready to start work. And it's because they need each other. They're not going out to get insurance from a distant corporate provider somewhere hundreds of miles away. They need each other to survive. And so that very factor necessitates strong relationships. So my point in saying in all of that is, I think we're going to need each other again. And I think it would be wise to not wait until calamity arrives or a crisis arrives to say, hey, maybe I should get to know my neighbors. Maybe I should invite them over for dinner. Maybe I should invite that new family that's going to church over for dinner this week. We really need to invest in those relationships now while we have time to do so. And guess what? You're going to live a better life. The deeper relationships you have with your own family, with your church, with your community, all you're trading is frivolous nonsense. I mean, materialistic types of pleasures. You're trading that for actual deep need in your own life for human relationships. And so those are very worthwhile things to pursue, regardless of if you have to or not.
So the trades, how do we how do we recover as a Christian community to get in a position to do the kinds of things you've been talking about? We've got about 9 minutes left in our webinar today. How do how do we re-encourage the trades in Christian community, and how do we get there? How do we put ourselves in a position to do exactly what you're calling on us to do, to not wait until calamity strikes to try and put these things in place, but to actually start pursuing them now? How do we do that? How do we encourage the trades as a Christian community? How do we encourage, especially the durable trades? How do we start moving towards that direction? Certainly getting to know your neighbors, certainly actually talking to people. How do we structurally, as American Christianity, how do we start working in that direction?
Yeah, well, the buzzword there is American Christianity. And so what America is a very consumerist oriented culture, and we have been for a long time, as much of the Western world. You're pretty much not going to get there as long as you're still serving a different master. If mammon is your master, if you're still desiring the maximum possible income as a validation for your worth in your career, then you're not going to be able to achieve this kind of level of community investment. You have to have other measures that you're willing to acknowledge that are as viable or more important than the size of your paycheck. So in other words, you got to stop putting efficiency and economy ahead of relationships. And that's really comes down to a matter of the heart. Jesus said, how did he say it? The word, life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. So you either take him at his word or you're serving mammon. And so if you want to, so you could start by repenting if that's where you're at, and asking God to help show you where your true loyalty should lie. But then secondarily, the trades are an extension of serving each other. I mean, if you look through, the list of trades, the top 20 trades that are family centered, these are all related to food, fiber, and shelter. And so these are things that every generation, I mean, for thousands of years, we all were practicing self-sufficient skills in things, like spinning wool and tailoring and weaving, and then all kinds of fiber craft, growing food, harvesting food for our own supply, and then selling the excess to our friends and neighbors, bartering typically. And then the building trades. There's so many viable skills and imperishable kinds of skills when it comes to building. So if you have a community, of families, even a church with several families that are invested in learning these kinds of things or mentoring each other, if there are people in your church who would be willing to mentor young people who are coming up, give them some exposure to these trades. I think when I'm getting back to my point is that it's probably not going to happen overnight. But what if we would train the next generation to have some options, to not have to be pinned down by a corporate job and have a huge 30-year mortgage hanging over their head so they could never leave that job? What if we gave our children options by teaching them some basic trades that humans have practiced for all of time? And so that when it's time for them to start their families, they have a little bit more independence than we do. So if you start to look at it generationally, I think there's a lot more opportunity. My wife likes to say I'm a sober-minded optimist because I really do see that there's a lot of wonderful opportunities ahead if we will turn our hearts as fathers and as mothers to the children and let our children turn their hearts to us. There's an incredible amount of opportunity. And I guess I wouldn't have time to unpack individual trades on what you could do. I mean, you could certainly look through the book or look at the table of contents on, anywhere you preview the book, it would give you some ideas. But the point is, I think we're all drawn to agriculture to some degree or another. And I think that everyone can start somewhere by becoming just more self-sufficient. If you can just build a little bit more knowledge and skill around providing food for your family, not only is it a healthier option than what you're buying in the store, but it's more sustainable. I mean, like the price of eggs right now. I only know about that because people send me pictures of the prices of eggs right now because we have eggs. They're about 50 feet away. They're laying all day. Egg laying machine is outside my front door. So we have our own insulation from what's going on from the economy around us. And that allows us to make decisions that are more healthy for our family, more healthy for our children, more healthy for our marriage. All of these things are a result. And you don't need a lot of space to have a chicken coop and have some laying chicks. It's not a big deal to do this. You could do this in a lot of suburban yards in the city. And so that's what I would encourage, a good place to start. Look for something that you can do, whether it's a garden, whether it's raising some animals, but do something that makes you more independent and more self-sufficient, and then do it with your family. And then prayerfully ask God, what is his vision for your family? Once he puts a vision on your heart, he has a way to reach that vision. I was going to say, he can split those seas to bring you to the other side, even if it seems insurmountable. If it's God's vision, he'll find a way through. But all you need to do is be responsible and obedient to what his task is for you today.
I think what you said is very important, that just do something. People think, I mean, it's so I popular homesteader we watch on YouTube said homesteading is not a competition. It's not like this is somehow you got to be able to do it perfectly and we're all competing against each other to see who can do it the best. No, you do what you can, and that's kind of really what our goal with our organization is trying to equip Christian young people to be able to do what they can on what it is that the Lord gives them as they go forth into this world. So yeah, it's not a competition. You just do what you can, plant some seeds and see what happens. Get a couple chickens and see what happens. And I think we know what happens. You get meat in the pot and you get eggs
And
on the
I'd
table.
also I'd also add to that, support other families who are
Sure.
doing it. Maybe you
Yep.
can't, you're not in a position where you can get chickens. Maybe you can go meet someone at a farmer's market and
Yep.
get to know a family one-on-one, and
Yep.
then you're also creating more independence for yourself because you're supporting a family that's
Yep.
doing it in your community, and they're going to be helped, and you're going to build a relationship.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's been such a joy, Rory, to have you with us today, and have you be a part of the Lyra webinar series here in 2023. What an enjoyable conversation, and thank you for all the work that you do. My family thoroughly enjoys your newsletters whenever they come. It's just a treasure trove, and we appreciate the work that you're doing, and we appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
You're very welcome. And I think you mentioned the newsletter there. And if anyone is interested, we do a free family newsletter that talks about all these topics. They'd be welcome to come sign up for that. I'm sure you can
Yeah.
provide the information.
Yep. I'll put the website below on this video. All right, the Lord be with you all, friends, and thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. We pray that the Lord blesses you all. God's blessings.